I said, yeah, because I really like Chris Robinson's vocals. I thought he was tremendous, and I knew he was tremendous.
Jimmy Page has never been someone who seeks attention or follows the usual path. For more than 50 years, he has been creating music that changes how people think about rock and roll. There are guitarists who play faster and others who play louder, but nobody sounds quite like Jimmy Page. His approach to music was always about creating something complete and meaningful, not just showing off his technical skills. He wanted to build compositions that would stand the test of time. Page was more than just someone who could play guitar well. He understood how to use the recording studio as an instrument itself. While other bands simply recorded their songs, Page treated each track like a painting, carefully adding layers and textures until he created something entirely new. He built sonic landscapes that transported listeners to different worlds. Every guitar riff he created seemed to turn into something magical, and every solo became legendary. But despite all this success, he never played just to impress people. He played to express something real and truthful. Throughout his career, Page made choices that set him apart from other musicians. When other guitarists were focused on playing as fast as possible, Page was more interested in touching people's souls. When others wanted attention and fame, Page was quietly building musical cathedrals. Hidden within all the power and mystery of his music are moments of pure emotion that feel almost like secrets being shared. Page knows exactly which songs cut the deepest for him personally. He can identify the ones that still surprise him when he hears them today, even though he created them decades ago. These are songs that felt dangerous and exciting when everything else in rock music felt predictable and safe. They're songs that actually changed him as an artist while he was playing them. Over his long career, he has written hundreds of songs, perhaps even thousands, but only a handful have stayed with him in a deeply personal way. Before all the legendary status and mythology grew around Led Zeppelin, before everything became larger than life, these particular songs still make him pause and really listen. They remind him why he first picked up a guitar and what music means to him at its core. One of these deeply meaningful songs is 10 Years Gone from Led Zeppelin's catalog. Some songs simply deal with loss, but this particular track explores something more complex. It examines time itself and how it changes everything. The song wasn't created with the intention of becoming a commercial hit. Instead, it came from something Page needed to express, a feeling that had been sitting inside him for years until it finally demanded to be released through music. The inspiration came from a very personal place in Page's life. There had been a relationship that ended, a woman who chose a different direction 10 years before the song was written. Page took that memory and transformed it into something musical. He approached the recording by layering guitar after guitar until he created an entire wall of sound. Each individual layer told a different part of the emotional story he was trying to convey. But the song wasn't just about one specific lost love. It dealt with bigger themes, about how time passes, about the choices people make that determine their futures, and about looking backward and wondering what might have been different. Page constructed the song with the same care an architect might use when designing a cathedral. Every single guitar line had a specific purpose and place in the overall structure. Every note mattered and contributed to the emotional impact. The recording process took several weeks because Page was such a perfectionist. He would play the same musical part over and over again, not because there was anything technically wrong with it, but because he knew it could be even better. He wanted every guitar track to have its own voice and character. He wanted them to communicate with each other and create something greater than the sum of their parts. When the band performed this song in concert, it became truly magical. Robert Plant's vocals would soar above the instrumental landscape. Page's multiple guitar parts created vast soundscapes that the audience could feel physically and emotionally. People listening could sense the weight of those 10 years that had passed. They could feel the regret, the acceptance, and the strange beauty that comes from finally letting go of something that once mattered deeply. The song isn't the heaviest thing Led Zeppelin ever recorded, and it certainly isn't the loudest, but it might be their most emotionally honest creation. With this track, Page stripped away some of the mystique that usually surrounded him and showed his vulnerable heart to the world. Somehow that openness made the song even more powerful than it would have been otherwise. Years after creating it, Page reflected that this was the song that taught him how vulnerability can actually be a form of strength. For him personally, 10 Years Gone represents artistic growth and maturity. It marks the moment when he learned that the deepest emotional cuts often make the best songs, and that sometimes you have to look backward in order to move forward. Another song that holds special meaning for Page is In My Time of Dying, which takes a completely different approach to emotion. Songs about death aren't usually meant to provide comfort, and this particular track was created to conquer the subject rather than soften it. The song started its life as an old blues tune that had been around for many decades before Led Zeppelin touched it, but Page heard something different lurking inside those ancient words and melodies. He recognized an opportunity to make history come alive again in a new way. The original version was quite simple in structure, just a story about a man facing the end of his life. But Page transformed it into an 11-minute musical journey that took listeners through many emotional landscapes. He made the traditional slide guitar approach express things words never could. He made it weep with sorrow, scream with anguish, and tell stories that existed beyond language. This wasn't simply a cover version of an old song. This was a complete resurrection of musical ideas that might have been forgotten otherwise. The recording session for this track was like trying to capture lightning in a bottle. The entire band was performing at an incredibly high level. Plant's voice cracked with genuine emotion throughout the recording. John Bonham's drumming thundered like the apocalypse itself. John Paul Jones anchored everything with his bass work, while Page painted sonic pictures above it all. Page later said that everyone in the room could feel they were creating something special. The energy was undeniable. For Page, the slide guitar became another voice, almost like a confession of his deepest thoughts. Every note he bent conveyed pain and struggle. Every moment of silence between notes spoke volumes about human mortality. He didn't play fast to impress anyone. He didn't show off his technical abilities unnecessarily. He simply allowed pure emotion to pour through his fingers onto the strings. The result was raw, honest, and completely exposed in a way that rock music rarely achieves. When Led Zeppelin performed this song in concert, it became almost like a religious ceremony. Audiences would stand in complete silence, mesmerized by what they were witnessing. They watched Page transform an old blues standard into something timeless and universal. His fingers moved across the guitar strings with the intensity of prayer. The instrument seemed to cry, rage, and speak profound truths about what it means to be mortal and face death. This song proved that Page deeply understood musical tradition and respected where things came from, but he also possessed the skill to make classic material completely his own. He took something ancient and somehow made it feel brand new and relevant. Page once reflected that the blues never really dies as a musical form. Instead, traditional blues songs just find new voices to tell their eternal stories in fresh ways. For him personally, In My Time of Dying represents the transformative power of music. It shows how something old can become new again through interpretation, and how themes of death can actually become celebrations of life when channeled through powerful music. A third song that means a great deal to Page is Since I've Been Loving You, which approaches the blues from yet another angle. The blues as a musical form doesn't allow for dishonesty, and Page never learned how to fake genuine emotion in his playing. This particular song was different from almost everything else Led Zeppelin recorded. There were no studio tricks employed, no overdubbing of parts, and no safety net. It was just four talented musicians in a room together, playing from their hearts with complete honesty. The remarkable thing about this track is that it came together almost like magic during recording. The band captured it in essentially one take. That's all it required to create something powerful and lasting. Page's guitar work sounds like the instrument is actually bleeding emotion. Plant's vocals crack with authentic pain that couldn't be faked. Bottom's drumming feels like a broken heart trying to keep beating. Jones held the entire musical structure together while everyone else seemed to be falling apart emotionally. Page had spent years studying the great blues masters who came before him. He knew their techniques, their tricks, and understood the pain they channeled into their music. But this song wasn't about copying those earlier artists. It was about feeling the same things they had felt and making those universal emotions his own through his unique musical voice. The guitar tone he achieved was absolutely crucial to the song's impact. It sounded warm yet sharp at the same time, clean yet somehow dirty, sweet yet bitter. Page spent countless hours working to get the tone exactly right. He later explained that he wanted the guitar to sound like someone crying, like a person desperately trying not to break down completely but failing to hold back the tears. The recording session was deeply emotional for everyone involved in creating the track. If you listen carefully, you can actually hear Plant's voice shaking on certain lines. You can feel Page holding back his own tears through his guitar playing. This wasn't simply a musical performance captured on tape. It was therapy, music functioning as medicine for emotional wounds that refused to heal properly. The song became a favorite during Led Zeppelin's live concerts. Audiences instinctively knew they were hearing something completely real and authentic, something raw and unpolished and beautiful precisely because of those qualities. Page played the song differently every single night because genuine blues music changes depending on your emotional state. Music critics called it Led Zeppelin's best blues song. Dedicated fans called it the band's most powerful musical moment. But for Page himself, the explanation was much simpler than that. He said years later that it's just honest music, and sometimes that honesty is all music really needs to be meaningful. For Page, Since I've Been Loving You proved an important artistic principle. It demonstrated that vulnerability actually creates power rather than weakness. It showed that the deepest, most affecting songs come from the deepest emotional cuts a person experiences. Sometimes the very best performance is simply letting go of control and allowing raw emotion to flow freely. The fourth song that holds special significance for Page is the Rain Song, which proves that powerful music doesn't always need to be loud and aggressive. Not every storm needs thunder and lightning. Sometimes rain just needs to fall gently. This particular song came about because of a challenge, really more like a dare from a music journalist. This critic claimed that Led Zeppelin couldn't write proper ballads, that they were just noise and overwhelming power without subtlety. Page took that dismissive comment as a personal mission to prove otherwise. He sat down with his acoustic guitar and started to explore new musical territory. He asked himself important creative questions. What if rock music could be genuinely soft and gentle? What if all that heaviness could be turned into something delicate? He discovered melodies that seemed to float like clouds drifting across the sky. He found chord progressions that moved with the fluidity of water. This creative process wasn't really about proving critics wrong anymore. It became about proving to himself what was possible.
The recording process required extremely delicate work because every single note mattered to the overall effect. Page layered multiple acoustic guitars together like an artist painting with light and shadow. He added orchestral strings to enhance the atmosphere. He added space and silence as compositional elements. He wanted the song to feel like actual rain falling, starting soft and gentle at first, then gradually building into something bigger and more powerful. Plant's vocals became like wind moving through this musical storm. His voice shifted from gentle whispers to powerful calls that conveyed deep emotion. The lyrics painted vivid pictures of love and longing and complex feelings. But it was Page's guitar work that made listeners actually feel the weather changing, that made them smell rain in the air before it arrived. This song fundamentally changed how people perceived Led Zeppelin as a band. It revealed that they had genuine hearts beating beneath all that famous power and volume. It proved they could make audiences cry just as easily as they could make them rock out wildly. Critics who had dismissed them as just another heavy metal band were forced to reconsider that simplistic judgment. This was genuine art, poetry expressed through motion and sound. During live performances, the Rain Song became a peaceful moment within their otherwise wild and energetic shows. Instead of headbanging, audiences would sway gently to the music. They would close their eyes and let the sound wash over them like water. Page played it as if he were painting the sky itself, using soft brushstrokes that somehow created entire worlds of feeling and imagination. The song became a genuine turning point for the band's creative direction. It opened doors to exploring new sounds and new possibilities they hadn't considered before. Page had demonstrated that power doesn't always mean volume, that emotion can actually be louder than any amplifier turned up to maximum, and that true musical masters can work effectively with both fire and water as creative elements. For Page personally, the Rain song proved that versatility is a form of strength. It showed that the best artists can whisper just as effectively as they can scream, and that sometimes the quietest musical moments create the hardest emotional impact. He later reflected that this song taught him music has absolutely no limits except the ones artists put themselves through limited thinking. Finally, the song that Page seems to value most highly is Kashmir, which represents something almost mystical in his creative journey. Some musical riffs are carefully written and composed. This particular riff felt like it was excavated from somewhere ancient and mysterious. Kashmir didn't emerge from a normal guitar lesson or from casual jamming sessions in a garage. It came from somewhere much deeper, somewhere that felt almost ancient and eternal. Page discovered it the way an archaeologist might discover buried treasure from a lost civilization. The guitar tuning he used violated every rule in conventional music instruction books. The rhythm pattern made no logical sense according to standard rock music theory. But Page heard something that other musicians couldn't perceive. He heard a sound that felt like massive mountains and endless deserts, like traveling to mysterious places that didn't exist on any real map. He started with just that hypnotic, driving riff. It looped and twisted like a snake charmer's melody, designed to entrance and captivate. Then Bonham added his drumming, which thundered like ancient war gods battling. Plant's vocals soared above everything like an eagle flying through vast open spaces. Together, these elements created something that transcended normal rock music and became something almost spiritual. Recording Kashmir was like constructing a pyramid, an enormous project where every layer had to be absolutely perfect. Every sound carried specific meaning and purpose. Page incorporated full orchestras into the recording. He used exotic instruments that rock music had rarely heard before. He was painting with sounds that pushed far beyond conventional boundaries. He wanted the song to feel like an actual journey through strange lands. For Page, this song changed everything about what he thought was possible. It proved that rock music could be genuinely spiritual and mystical, that it could transport people to other worlds beyond normal reality. This wasn't just entertainment or even just music. This was magic, a spell cast using an unusual guitar tuning. When Led Zeppelin performed Kashmir live in concert, it became like a religious experience for everyone present. Audiences didn't simply hear the music, they felt it vibrating in their bones and resonating in their souls. That main riff grabbed listeners and refused to let go. Page played it as if he were summoning ancient spirits from another realm, channeling powers and energies older than civilization itself. Critics struggled to categorize it, eventually settling on calling it progressive rock. Fans described it as transcendent, beyond normal description. But Page understood what it really represented. He reflected that it isn't about showing off technical skill. Instead, it's about touching something eternal, something that existed before music was invented and will continue existing after everything else fades away. The song took years to perfect because Page became completely obsessed with getting every detail exactly right. He would play that main riff for hours on end, constantly searching for the perfect guitar tone, the ideal echo effect, the right delay setting. Every tiny detail mattered tremendously because Kashmir wasn't just another song in the catalog. This was his masterpiece, his statement to the entire world about what music could achieve. For Page, Kashmir represents the ultimate creative achievement. It marks the moment when technical skill became genuine transformation, when a simple guitar riff became a gateway to something infinite and eternal. He has said it's the song he feels most proud of creating because it emerged from a creative place he had never accessed before. For Jimmy Page, a song isn't truly finished until it haunts you emotionally. These 5 particular tracks represent different aspects of his complex soul and artistic personality. There's the mystic, the bluesman, the perfectionist, the traditionalist, and the vulnerable artist all coexisting within one person. Together, these songs tell the complete story of a man who managed to turn sound itself into legend. His music continues to inspire new generations of listeners and musicians who discover that guitar playing can be about so much more than technical ability. It can be about touching something eternal in the human experience.